There are moments in life that feel ordinary at first. Moments that pass by like any other day, unnoticed, unimportant, until something happens that changes everything. Something so unexpected, so deeply emotional, that it leaves a mark not only on the people involved, but on everyone who witnesses it. Because sometimes, the most powerful stories don't begin with explosions or chaos. They begin quietly, with a single, simple encounter. It was a normal day at the fire station. The kind of day where routines repeat themselves, where firefighters move between tasks with a sense of calm readiness, always prepared for the next call, always aware that at any second, everything could shift. But at that particular moment, nothing seemed out of place, until the station doors opened, and a small boy walked in. At first, no one reacted. Children occasionally visited stations, especially in a city like New York, where firefighters were seen as heroes, symbols of courage that young kids admired. But there was something different about this boy, something subtle that made a few of the firefighters pause without fully understanding why, because he didn't look around in awe like most children would, didn't hesitate or seem unsure. Instead, he walked forward with purpose, straight toward one man, Captain Jim Grimes. And before anyone could ask a question, before anyone could even understand what was happening, the boy reached into his pocket and handed Jim a small, slightly crumpled piece of paper, holding it out with a smile that didn't match the weight of the moment that was about to unfold. And for a brief second, Jim simply stared at it, confused, trying to recognize the boy standing in front of him, trying to connect a face to a memory that felt just out of reach. But the moment he opened the note, everything changed. His expression shifted instantly. His eyes scanning the words once, then again, as if his mind refused to accept what he was reading, as if the meaning behind those words carried something far greater than ink on paper. And slowly, almost involuntarily, his hands began to tremble, his breathing became uneven, and before he could stop it, tears started forming in his eyes. It couldn't be. And yet, it was. Without saying a single word, Jim dropped to his knees and pulled the boy into a tight embrace, holding on to him as if he were afraid that letting go would make him disappear, as if this moment, this impossible return, would vanish if he didn't hold on to it tightly enough. And around them, the entire station fell silent. Every firefighter watching, understanding without needing an explanation that this wasn't just a visit. This was something much deeper. Because to understand why Jim reacted that way, you have to go back. Back to the moment when their paths first crossed. Jim Grimes had spent his entire life in the fire service, born and raised in New York City, following in the footsteps of generations before him. Men who had dedicated their lives to protecting others, men who understood the weight of responsibility that came with the uniform. And over the years, Jim had seen things most people could never imagine, moments of bravery, moments of loss, moments that stayed with him long after the flames were gone. But nothing had prepared him for the day he met Tucker. It happened during a routine call. Nothing out of the ordinary. Just another day in a long career filled with unpredictable moments. But as Jim was returning to his vehicle, preparing to leave the scene, he noticed a young boy approaching him, accompanied by his mother. Both of them standing out in a way that was hard to explain, as if their presence carried a quiet urgency beneath the surface. The boy introduced himself, Tucker. And from the very first moment, it was clear that he wasn't like other kids. There was a certain energy about him, a spark that didn't match his fragile appearance, because despite his bright smile and excited eyes, there was something else there too, something heavier, something that hinted at a story far more complicated than anyone could see at first glance. His mother, Sarah, stood beside him, watching closely, her expression warm but filled with something unspoken. Something that suggested she already knew this moment would mean more than it seemed. Tucker didn't waste time. He looked up at Jim with pure admiration and told him something that instantly caught his attention. He loved firefighters more than anything in the world, not in the casual way children admire heroes, but in a way that felt personal, almost like it was part of who he was, something deeply rooted in his identity. And as he spoke, his excitement was undeniable, his words coming quickly, his passion spilling out without hesitation. At first, Jim smiled. It wasn't unusual. Kids often dreamed of becoming firefighters. But then Sarah explained. And everything shifted. Because this wasn't just admiration. This was connection. Tucker's father was a firefighter too. Not in New York, but far away, in Hawaii. And suddenly, the pieces began to come together. the reason behind Tucker's fascination, the reason behind his presence here, the reason behind the way his mother watched him so carefully, as if every moment mattered more than it should. Jim felt it, that subtle change in the air, the moment when a simple conversation begins to reveal something deeper. So he asked the question, the one that changed everything. "Why are you here, instead of home?" And for a brief second, Sarah hesitated. As if the answer she was about to give was something she had already repeated too many times. Something that never became easier to say no matter how often she had to explain it. And when she finally spoke, her voice was calm, but there was a weight behind it that immediately shifted the atmosphere around them. Because she told Jim that Tucker wasn't in New York by choice. He was there because he had been fighting something far bigger than anyone his age should ever have to face. Cancer. Not just any kind. Neuroblastoma, a word that carried with it months of uncertainty, endless hospital visits, treatments that drained more than they healed, and a reality that no parent is ever prepared to accept. Because Tucker had been diagnosed when he was barely more than a baby, at just over a year old, and since then, his life had been a cycle of hospitals, medications, and procedures that most adults would struggle to endure, let alone a child who still found reasons to smile through it all. For nearly 2 years, New York had become their temporary home. Not because they wanted it to be, but because it was where the best chance for treatment existed, where doctors tried everything they could to slow the progression of the disease, to buy time, to create hope in a situation where hope was becoming harder to hold on to with each passing day. And yet despite all of that, despite the treatments, the surgeries, the chemotherapy, nothing had worked the way they had prayed it would. The cancer had reached stage 4, and the decision they had made was one of the hardest a family could ever face. They were going home, not because he was cured, but because they wanted him to be surrounded by love, by family, by something familiar, for whatever time he had left. The words settled heavily in Jim's chest. The kind of truth that doesn't just stay in your ears, but sinks deeper, forcing you to feel it whether you want to or not. And for a moment, he didn't know what to say, because nothing ever feels like enough in situations like that. No words that can truly match the weight of what someone is going through. But Tucker didn't focus on that. He didn't talk about hospitals or treatments or fear. Instead, he looked up at Jim with the same excitement as before and told him the one thing that mattered most to him in that moment. He had a request. A simple one. He wanted to be a firefighter. Not someday. Not in the future. Now. For even a moment. And something about the way he said it, the certainty in his voice, the purity of that wish, made it impossible to ignore. Because this wasn't just a child dreaming. This was a child choosing how he wanted to live, despite everything he was facing, and without hesitation. Jim made a decision. He said yes, but not just a simple yes. He wanted to make it real as possible. What started as a small promise quickly turned into something much bigger. Because Jim couldn't stop thinking about it, couldn't let the idea go. And over the next few days, he worked with the department, speaking to everyone he could, organizing something that went far beyond what Tucker had asked for. Because if this was going to happen, it had to be unforgettable. They planned a ceremony, an official one. Tucker wouldn't just feel like a firefighter. He would become one, honorary, but real in every way that mattered. As the day approached, something unexpected happened. Word began to spread, not just within the station, but beyond it. And then came the surprise that caught even Jim off guard. Tucker's father, Joshua, along with other family members, arranged to fly in from Hawaii to be there, to witness the moment their son's dream would come true. And suddenly, what started as a simple act of kindness turned into something far more meaningful, something that connected people across distances, across experiences, across lives. The day of the ceremony arrived, and for a moment, everything felt normal. Not like a hospital, not like a goodbye, but like a celebration. Tucker wore his firefighter gear with pride, standing beside the men he admired, surrounded by smiles, laughter, and a sense of belonging that no illness could take away from him. And when they officially welcomed him into the department, when they handed him his badge, something shifted in the room. Because it wasn't just about granting a wish anymore. It was about recognizing something real. Courage. Not the kind that runs into burning buildings, but the kind that wakes up every day and chooses to keep going, no matter what. And for a while, that moment held. It stayed with everyone who was there. A perfect memory. But life doesn't pause. Even for moments like that. Because, not long after, the reality they had been holding back began to catch up again. And the family made another decision, one that was even harder than the last. They chose to stop treatment completely, not out of defeat, but out of love, because they understood that sometimes fighting isn't about continuing the battle, sometimes it's about choosing peace. What followed was something unexpected. Instead of focusing on what was being lost, they focused on what remained. Time, moments, experiences. They began traveling, exploring, creating memories that would last far beyond anything medicine could offer, sharing their journey with the world, allowing people to witness not just the struggle, but the joy that still existed within it. And as their story spread, something incredible happened. People listened, people cared, people supported them. But even as hope grew in the hearts of those watching, reality remained unchanged. And less than a year later, Tucker passed away, quietly, at home, surrounded by the people who loved him most. The world slowed again, just like it had that first day. But this time, the silence meant something different. It wasn't confusion. It was loss. And yet, his story didn't end there, because what he left behind was something far greater than a single moment, far greater than a single wish fulfilled. Because in fire stations across New York and Hawaii, his name remained, his memory carried forward by the people who had witnessed his strength, who had seen firsthand what it meant to live fully, even when time was limited. And for Jim, that moment at the station, when the boy walked in and handed him that note, would stay with him forever. A reminder that sometimes the smallest requests carry the greatest meaning, and sometimes the strongest heroes are the ones you least expect.